People are confused, they don't know where to go, stepping on each other. That's when I saw a white lady with 3 children. So they were running in different directions. That's when I picked one.
1st of September. The 2 men captured in the CCTV footage are youthful in appearance, with police estimating their ages as between 24 and 27. The first suspect goes by the names Hussein Abdi Ali or Abdullahi Dugon Subor, a dark 5'5" man said to be a Somali national and who, according to police, speaks broken Kiswahili. The second suspect has been identified as Abdikadir Haret Mohammed, who also goes by the name Mohammed Hussein, a light-skinned 5'8" man said to be a Kenyan of Somali origin from Mandera.
In the heart of Westland's Nairobi bustling commercial district sat a modern monument to leisure, luxury and a rising urban class, Westgate Shopping Mall. With its glass facade gleaming in the midday sun and the hum of weekend life vibrating through its halls, Westgate was more than just a shopping complex. It was a symbol of aspiration, prosperity, and comfort. Foreign embassies were nearby. The parking lot gleamed with luxury SUVs. Mothers sipped cappuccinos at Art Cafe while children played at the rooftop fun zone. It was the kind of place where people came to feel safe, shielded from the chaos of the world outside. But beyond Kenya's borders, in the war-torn land of Somalia, that very comfort had painted our targets on the Westgate glass doors. 2 years earlier, in October 2011, the Kenyan government had made a bold move. After months of insertion and kidnapping by Somalia Al-Shabaab militants, the Kenya Defense Forces KDF crossed the border in a military campaign dubbed Operation Linda Nchi, Protect the Nation. Their mission to root out Al-Shabaab fighters and destroy the extremist group's strongholds near the Kenyan frontier. At the time, the operation was hailed as a necessary stunt, Kenya flexing its muscle in defense of national sovereignty. But to Al-Shabaab, Kenya had declared war, and like all wars, retaliation would come, not on a battlefield but in the heart of Nairobi, amongst innocents. For months before the attack, intelligence had flickered with sign of an impending large-scale assault, whispers in Isili, suspicious movement of weapons, anonymous warnings. Even the foreign embassies hinted at vague threats, but in a city used to political turbulence and media noise, the alerts melted into the background, just another security concern in a long list of vague terror chatter. No one imagined a bloodbath. Not here. Not like this. The attackers had been planning for months, perhaps even years. Surveillance footage later revealed they had visited Westgate on scouting missions. They studied entrance, exits, CCTV blind spots. They noted which times were busiest, when security was thinnest, where the escape routes led. They weren't unhinged fanatics. They were methodical, intelligent, and cold-blooded men. The weaponry had already been smuggled in. Some reports say part of it were hidden inside shops rented by accomplices. Others say the attackers simply brought them in hidden bags, knowing the mall security checks were mostly symbolic. Smile at the guard, open your handbag, wave the wand, walk in. Nairobi's affluence had created a sense of invulnerability. It was a bubble waiting to burst. That Saturday, 21st September 2013, was the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. Westgate, known for its large Jewish clientele and Israeli ownership, was unusually busy. Families gathered for lunch. NGOs workers grabbed supplies, experts wandered the shop, and Kenyan elites enjoyed a lazy day of peace. But for 4 young men, the day had a different purpose. They had dressed in casual clothes, blended in, their faces mostly youthful, almost forgettable, but hidden in their bags were AK-47, grenade and loaded magazines. Their hearts were hardened by ideology. Their mission was simple: kill as many people as possible, instill fear, punish Kenya for defying Al-Shabaab, and make the world watch. As they approached the mall, pulling into the front parking lot is a silver SUV. No alarms went off. No one stopped them. They stepped out, calm and collected, adjusted their jackets and began to load their weapons. At 12:29 p.m., the last peaceful minutes of Westgate. By 12:30 p.m., The glass doors of mall would be shattered by bullets. Screams would echo down the marble corridors, and a nation would be thrust into 4 days of terror. "12:30 p.m. Saturday 21st September 2013, it began with a screech of tires. A silver Mitsubishi Pajero SUV pulled up abruptly outside the main entrance of Westgate Mall. Inside were 4 men, young, lean, dressed in jeans, t-shirts and a light jacket. Nothing out of the ordinary. To the untrained eye, they looked like any other Nairobi youth. College kids, maybe, IT guys, maybe shoppers, but these were not ordinary men, they were soldiers of death. As the SUV rolled to a stop, they stepped out swiftly, one with an AK-47 already slung over his shoulder, the others clutching backpacks filled with extra magazines, grenade and communication devices. Their expressions were cold, detached, mechanical. The mall security guard at the front, an unarmed man in a blue uniform, had only seconds to register what was happening. He took a cautious step forward, and that's when the first gunshot rang out. The guard dropped instantly, blood pooling around his khaki boots. He hadn't even raised his hand. Panic spread like fire. A matatu driver parked near the entrance dived to the ground as glass shattered behind him. A mother with a toddler clutched her child and froze, paralyzed by the sound of automatic gunfire echoing through the pavements. The attackers moved fast. 2 entered through the mall main doors, spraying bullets as they advanced. 2 more slipped in through the side entrance, the one near the rooftop parking lot and another through the Nakumatt grocery section. Inside the mall, shoppers at Art Cafe first thought it was a robbery. Waiters ducked, plates crashed, someone screamed, then more shots. Closer this time, unrelenting, not a robbery, not a warning. This was war. At 12:35 p.m. in Nakumatt, shoppers dropped to the floor as glass displayed exploded. Fruit spilled across the tiles. A father shielding his daughter tried to crawl towards the back aisle. He didn't make it. Nearby, a French woman, 5 months pregnant, was hit in the leg. Bleeding, she dragged herself behind a display fridge, where she would remain for nearly 5 hours. Upstairs at the rooftop play area, chaos erupted. Children screamed as the bouncing castle deflated from stray bullets. Some parents tried to scale down to the lower level using balconies. One woman jumped 2 floors, breaking her leg to escape with her infant strapped to her back. At 12:40 p.m., the attackers began moving room to room, methodical, deliberate, not in a hurry. They would enter shops and command everyone inside to lie down. Then they would ask, "Are you Muslims?" If someone answered yes, they were asked to recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. If they could, they lived. If they hesitated, even for a second, they died. Witnesses recalled seeing phones checked, ID cards examined, names read aloud. People with Christian names were shot on sight. In the LC Waikiki clothing store, a group of teenage girls hid in the changing rooms. One of them sent a text to her father. "Daddy, I'm scared. There are men shooting. Please come." Minutes later, the attacker entered. One girl screamed. Only one would survive, hiding beneath a pile of jeans, holding her breath, pretending to be dead. At 12:50 p.m., the police began arriving. Siren wailed outside, but confusion reigned. Was this a robbery gone wrong, hostage situation, or a gang attack? The Nairobi police set up perimeters, but they were heavily outgunned. Inside the mall, the attackers had thousands of rounds. They had grenades and they had time. The first group of Kenya Elite Recce Squad commandos had been deployed, but will not enter yet. There was a command vacuum. Police, GSU, KDF, all present, but with no clear coordination. At 1:10 p.m., a brave officer named David Odhiambo, wearing bulletproof vest and carrying an M16, tried to make an entry through the rooftop entrance. He was met with gunfires. He was hit 3 times in the chest. His colleagues pulled him back as his blood soaked the tiles. He later died on arrival at Aga Khan Hospital. Survivors hid whenever they could, under shelves, inside ventilation ducts, behind cash counters. Some climbed into ceiling panels. One couple hid inside a cold storage fridge for over 20 hours. Phone batteries were dying. People texted their loved ones goodbye. The attackers split up. One stayed near the supermarket, another patrolled the lower level, 2 remained near the main corridor. They communicated via radio, occasionally shouting to each other in Somali.
So they were running in different directions. That's when I picked one.
I started to run, and then a Kenyan woman came and grabbed one of the girls from me, and we dove behind this computer display table that was there.
Some survivors reported hearing laughter, the gunmen mocking the victims, cracking jokes, even praying between kills. "This is for Somali. This is for our people." One was heard shouting. Another was captured on CCTV casually adjusting his rifle, strolling past corpses. At 2 p.m., Al-Shabaab officially claimed responsibility on Twitter. The message was chilling. The Mujahideen entered Westgate Mall in Nairobi and are still inside. This is retribution for Kenyan forces in Somalia. This wasn't just an attack. This was a statement, a performance of terror, live streamed to the world, meant to break Kenyan spirits.
Kidogo tu sio mingi sana. Hayampatie chupa ndogo. Let's go. Push.
Sunday 22nd September 2013, the sun rose slowly over Nairobi, casting a golden hue across the city. But in Westlands, the light didn't bring warmth, it brought dread. Westgate Mall, once a gleaming symbol of middle-class opulence, now stood like a haunted mausoleum. Smoke curled out from shattered windows. The road was sealed off. Soldiers, police officers, journalists, and terrified relatives huddled outside the perimeter, all staring into the unknown. Inside the mall, the scene was apocalyptic. Broken glass crunched underfoot. Blood pooled along the tiled corridors. A silent cell phone vibrated inside a dead woman's purse. Children's shoes lay scattered near the toy world shop, some still smeared with footprints from those who ran, others from those who never got the chance. At least 200 civilians were still trapped, some hiding, some injured, some already dead. Others were being held as hostages by the attackers, 4 gunmen heavily armed and eerily calm. The gunmen had shifted tactics overnight. They stopped shooting indiscriminately. Instead, they dug in. They fortified positions, particularly near the Nakumatt supermarket, where they had dragged some hostages. One attacker reportedly climbed at a balcony and began sniping at security officers outside, forcing them to retreat. At this point, the Kenya Police Service, the General Service Unit, and Kenya Defense Forces were all on site. But here's the grim truth. None of them were truly in command. There was no unified tactical headquarters, no central communication channel, no coordinated hostage rescue plan. While elite rocket squad units, Kenya's most trained counter-terror team, had successfully rescued dozens on day 1, they were ordered to stand down to make way for the KDF, a move that has since been criticized as one of the greatest tactical errors of the entire operation. Meanwhile, trapped civilians still inside the mall could hear the argument outside of a radio chatter, different security arms debating who should move in first. Every wasted minute meant another life at risk. Inside Nakumatt, dozens of terrified civilians lay face down, forced to stay quiet. One of them was a young woman named Doris, a shop attendant who had been shot in the shoulder and was bleeding into her uniform. Next to her, a 14-year-old boy silently wept, clutching his mother's lifeless hand. The attackers occasionally shouted instruction in Kiswahili and Somali. "Stay quiet or we shoot you too." At one point, one of the gunmen walked past the group, spraying air fresheners to mask the stench of blood and rot. Another lit a cigarette and laughed. One began reciting verses from the Quran. Another was seen on CCTV changing clothes, ditching his combat jacket for civilian attire, a sign he was preparing for something. In the early hours of Sunday afternoon, explosions were heard from inside the mall. Not once, not twice. Several loud booms. Security forces initially claimed the attackers were throwing grenades or setting off IEDs. But survivors would later say, "We had drilling, we had things being forced open." Here's the truth that would haunt Kenya for years. Some KDF soldiers were looting. Shops were broken into, safes emptied, jewelry stores ransacked. Surveillance footage would later show soldiers carrying plastic bags filled with stolen goods, even from dead shop owners' stores. That same afternoon, Nakumatt caught fire. Whether the blaze was caused by a stray grenade or a fuel line ruptured during combat or an attempt to cover up looting, the official answer remains murky to this day. What we do know is that hostages trapped in Nakumatt began burning alive. The fire raged for over 6 hours. Smoke poured out of the mall's roof as firefighters waited outside, blocked by military personnel. The screams inside gradually stopped. First the cries, then silence.
As darkness falls on the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, it appears the Westgate shopping mall siege is nearing its end. The Interior Minister announced his forces had regained control of the entire 5-story building, killing 3 terrorists.
At around 5:50 p.m., an elite wrecker squad team tried to re-enter the mall from the roof. They had intelligence that hostages were trapped inside the kitchen of a cafe on the 2nd floor. As they advanced down the corridor, they were mistaken for terrorists by KDF soldiers already inside. They were fired upon by their own. One wrecker officer was killed, 2 others injured. The incident was covered up, quietly buried under fog of war explanations. But within the ranks, the truth circulated bitterly. Kenya's elites were killing their own. It was the cost of the confusion, of egos, of broken chains of command.
Hello? Yeah, they are armed. FLC2. There is a terrorist. I think they are terrorists, not criminals.
Elsewhere in the mall, survivors continued clinging to life. A woman named Caroline Mutheu, 8 months pregnant, had hidden inside a cleaning closet behind the food court for nearly 30 hours. She was dehydrated, shaky, and nearly unconscious when she was finally rescued. A group of children, led by Red Cross volunteers, had crawled through a ventilation duct from the casino area to the outside. One boy kept whispering, "Are we dead yet?" Another survivor was a Sikh man named Karam Singh, who had been shot in the leg while shielding 2 toddlers behind a couch in a Samsung store. He used a phone charger cord to tie off his wound, praying the blood would stop. By nightfall of day 2, global media has set up live coverage. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, all broadcasting Kenya's pain to the world. Relatives camped outside mall across Nairobi, unsure where the next target might be. Kenya was afraid, but also furious. The questions were multiplying. Why is it taking days to neutralize 4 attackers? Who is really leading this operation? How many more must die? On Monday 23rd, September 2013, the siege was entering its 3rd day. On the streets of Westland, tension had turned into numbness. Relatives of the missing clutched printed photos outside the police perimeter. Journalists shifted from reporting to waiting. The sky over Nairobi was grey and heavy, and by mid-morning, it matched the thick, choking smoke now billowing from the upper floors of Westgate Mall. At first, it looked like a tactical assault, like the Kenyan Defense Forces had finally cornered the attackers, like the end was near. It wasn't cover fire, it was a distraction. It was a fire, a real fire, a deadly suffocating blaze that was engulfing the heart of the mall, and no one was going to do a damn thing to put it out.
Money for the purchase of a second-hand vehicle they had ordered from an unsuspecting owner. The vehicle, a Mitsubishi Lancer with registration plate number KAS 575X, and which was paid for in dollars, said to be the...
At around 10 a.m., loud explosions shook the mall. It started with a low boom, deep, guttural and strange. Then another and another. By mid-morning on day 3, Westgate was on fire. Flames began pouring from the upper floors, thick plumes of black smoke coiling into Nairobi's skies like a dark omen. It wasn't just burning, it was collapsing from within, and with it, the last hopes of finding survivors alive. The Nakumatt supermarket where dozens of hostages had been hiding became an oven. Charred bodies were later found fused to the tiles. Others were burned beyond recognition, their screams never heard outside the walls. But the fire wasn't caused by terrorist bombs. That's what the government said, but it wasn't the truth. Multiple eyewitnesses, including firefighters and first responders, reported hearing drilling, hammering, and sounds of safes being broken into before the fire even started. Survivors said the attackers had retreated. The real threat was no longer gunfire, it was the looting, and then the fire. It felt like a cover-up. When the fire truck finally arrived, they were blocked by military. No entry, they were told. Too dangerous, they said. So the mall burned for hours and no one put it out. Inside the blaze erased everything. DNA, ballistics, CCTV servers, fingerprints, evidence of how many died, evidence of who looted, evidence of how badly the operation has failed. And just like that, the truth was incinerated. When the embers cooled, what remained was a hollowed-out carcass soaked in ash, silence, and shame. No official report had ever explained what sparked that fire. No agency has accepted blame. No soldiers was ever tried. But for families who never recovered the body, for the shopkeepers whose stores are turned to skeletons, and for a nation that watched answers burn in real time, that fire didn't consume flesh and steel, it consumed the truth. While the nation grieved, while mothers wept for their sons and children clung to life under rubbles, something else was unfolding inside the blood-stained corridors of Westgate Mall, something darker than terrorism. Looting by soldiers, by our own. As flames tore through Nakumatt and bodies lay twisted in the smoke, some members of Kenya Defence Forces sent in to end the siege turned the tragedy into opportunity. They weren't just hunting terrorists, they were raiding stores. CCTV footage later revealed the shameful truth. Armed soldiers in full gears carry out flat-screen TVs, phones, watches, alcohol, clothing, even cash from tills. One clip shows a man in uniform stuffing goods in a black garbage bag. Another shoving bottles of expensive wine into his backpack, stepping casually over corpses. This wasn't rogue behavior, it was organized, repeated, shameless. Outside, the world watched Kenya fight terror. Inside, some of its finest were emptying shelves as the mall burned. The drilling and hammering sounds were in stores untouched by gunfires, no signs of battle but a break-in. Shop owners returning days later found shelves cleaned out, inventory missing, and CCTV drives wiped. The government stayed quiet. A few low-level soldiers were questioned, but no one was held accountable. No resignation, no formal apology. Instead, the looting was buried beneath presidential speeches, flag of half-mast, and a talk of resilience. But ask anyone who lost their store. Ask any survivor who watched the soldier walk past dying hostages, arms full of stolen goods. They'll tell you, it wasn't just Al-Shabaab that tore Westgate apart, it was greed. It was betrayal in uniform, a disgrace written not in gunfire but in silence. And to this day, no one has answered for it. By day 3 of Westgate siege, the lines between enemy and ally had blurred. Terror wasn't just coming from the 4 gunmen still holed up inside the mall. It was coming from the confusion outside, from the boots on the ground wearing the same uniform. On paper, Kenya had deployed its best: the National Police Service, the General Service Unit, the Kenya Defence Forces, and the elite rescue squad, specially trained to counter terror hostage situations. But what should have been a well-oiled response became a battlefield of egos and miscommunication. There was no single command center, no unified operation leader, no shared communication channel. Each security agency had its own orders, its own turf, and its own pride. The result? Chaos. At around 5:30 p.m. on Sunday, a record squad team was sent in through the upper levels to clear shops and locate hostages. These were highly trained surgical operators, Kenya's best, but as they moved through the smoke-filled corridors, advancing toward what believed was a hostage clutter near the food court, they were mistaken for attackers by the Kenya Defence Forces already inside. One record squad officer, Sergeant Ronald Kiptum, was shot in the neck and died on the spot. 2 others were critically injured. The mission was aborted. The hostages were there. The hostages they were going to reach, they burned alive hours later when the fire consumed Nakumatt. No one claimed responsibility. The incident was buried, labeled fog of war, collateral damage, but within the security ranks, the bitterness festered. The message was clear. Kenya wasn't just fighting terror, it was fighting itself. Delayed action, missed rescue window, unnecessary deaths, and in the silence that followed them, the most haunting truth emerged. Sometimes the deadliest enemy wears your colors. By the evening of Tuesday, September 24th, the government declared the operation over. The terrorists were dead. The mall was secure, and Kenya, according to its leaders, had triumphed over terror. President Uhuru Kenyatta stood before the nation with a somber face and carefully crafted message. Kenya has stared down evil and triumphed. The security operation is over. The terrorists have been defeated. But behind the podium, truth had already been sacrificed. In the hours and days that followed, the contradiction piled up like bodies in Nakumatt. First, they said 5 attackers were dead. Then it was 4. Then they weren't sure. By the time forensic analysis was done, only 3 bodies could be definitively linked to the gunmen, so where were the others? Authorities claimed there was no hostage left alive by the time the mall was set on fire, but survivors' testimonies and SMS messages recovered from the dead proved otherwise. The government said they were not looting, just ongoing investigation. But the CCTV footage told a different story. Soldiers walking out with electronics, alcohol, and shopping bags during an active siege. The official death toll was listed at 67 civilians, 6 security personnel, and 5 terrorists. But insiders from the Red Cross and first responders whispered a different number, over 100 bodies. Some never recovered, some intentionally misclassified. And then silence. No high-ranking official resigned, no military officer was publicly tried, no inquiry was made public. It was a masterclass in narrative control, a national tragedy sanitized by statecraft. Terrorists were blamed, heroes were praised, and holes in the story papered over. But for the families of the dead, the business owners looted, and the wounded who still can't sleep through the night, there's no spin strong enough to cover the stench of what really happened. Because what we were told was never what really happened. Rescue workers moved blackened corridors, stepping over shattered glass and melted ceiling panels. The air still reeked of smoke, corroded and blood, and then they found them. Dozens of bodies, some shot at point-blank range, others fused to the supermarket floor, charred beyond recognition, mothers curled around their children, shop attendants frozen mid-flight, some still clutching phones, unanswered goodbye messages burned into the screens. At Nakumatt, a ceiling had collapsed during the fire, crushing several victims beneath steel beams. Others had asphyxiated, trapped between fire and inaction. Dental records have been used for identification. Some families were told there would be no body to bury, and scattered among the dead were questions, unanswered, unspoken, unwelcomed. How many lives were lost in the silence? How many deaths could have been prevented if rescue wasn't delayed? There were 67 names on the official list, but many believed the real numbers was high. And in the end, when the smoke cleared, it wasn't just bodies that were left behind. It was truth and trust.